So I have a mentor who has completely kind of shifted the way I think about business and really learning a skill. So there's this concept of what he has taught me about learning and viewing your progress in terms of quarters, semesters, years, and decades. And this concept has radically changed the way I even view myself, but also just my employees. So if you're constantly in the battle as someone like me, where you're in the trenches, you're working every day, you're working out, you can see behind me, you're working out, you're constantly trying to push yourself, and you feel like you're not really making the progress that you feel like you quote unquote deserve, then this video is for you. Because when we start to unpack this kind of framework, you start to see that one, usually it's a shift you need to change in your expectations on where you should be, and with that the internet just doesn't help truthfully. Like if you go back, we'll say like 100 years, right? You didn't really have access to the internet to really compare yourself to someone else that may be across the world who might have had better advantages, better cards, maybe just more experiences compared to you. Maybe they actually went into the right field at the right time and they got lucky. Maybe they went to the right field and then they picked the right subsect to learn compared to you. Maybe they learned, for example, in business, they learned copywriting before you did. And I'm speaking for my own example here, compared to someone who learned video editing, who has to kind of learn and kind of go through the different stages of learning entrepreneurship to understand that it all comes down to consistency. And when you understand it is consistency, you have to start planning a long-term game. When you can outwork someone on a long-term scale, when you outlap them over time because you optimize your health, because you optimize your sleep schedule, because you optimize the information you're taking in, then you're going to absolutely do wonders. And so it goes back to this concept of, first of all, setting your expectations and setting your sights correctly. And so that goes into thinking in quarters, thinking in semesters, thinking in years, and then thinking in terms of decades. And so there's a reason when you start to think and you really go to these bigger kind of companies why they say, okay, what does Q1 projections look like? What is Q2? What is Q3? And that's because they're segmented into quarters for this reason. When you look at day-to-day actions, it's hard to really predict that growth because sometimes all that work is front loaded and you won't see the success until 6 months later, until a year later. And that's because there's a compound growth to it. I know I kind of said a lot with that, and that was just kind of just everything I wanted to get out there. But I want to keep a couple steps back because when we start to think about progression and when we really start to think about why we really get in these trenches and we feel like we're not where we want to be at this current moment, we got to think about this as the so I got the kind of like notes here I want to kind of touch on. You got to think about this as the emotional side. Now, why do I say this? Because when you start to get caught up in this idea, in this kind of frame of I'm not where I want to be. I feel like I'm working extremely hard every day, or I feel like this person I've been working with, this certain employee, this certain maybe this person under me that I'm helping, trying to grow and upscale, are not getting to the point I want them to be. Well, are you giving them enough time? And so when you start to think about that and you start to unpack that, unravel that, and kind of add more, get more resolution on it, you sometimes notice that yourself gets harsher on them than what you would be maybe and harsh on you, which sometimes it's the other way around. But in this scenario, you might see that, oh, I could just do it better. Let me just cop in and fix it for them. And it's like, no. Did you have anyone to kind of step in and instantly just critique it, kind of be over your shoulder and micromanage? Probably not when you're learning because you have to grow with the skills. Now, you can guide them, right? But you got to give it some time to flourish and let them kind of figure out themselves. But this is not the whole point of the story. That's not the whole point of this video. Side point on that. The reason I bring the emotional side up is because when you're on the emotional side, you start to think short term. Yes, emotions are great. Emotions is actually the action. Emotions is what get you to move. I know there's, if you broke it up, there's like emotion, and I don't know. I remember if you broke it up, it actually meant like action or whatever. And so when we start to think short term, emotions equals short term. And when you're in the trenches, you're like, man, I feel like I've done tons of work. That's just because you're in the moment. And when you start to think about what you quote unquote think you deserve, because life is unfair, that everyone else gets it, but you don't, I like to kind of flip that 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 switch in your mind and say, okay, well, if you say life is unfair, compared to what? What is compared to, oh, this other person who only did it in 2 years and you're on the fourth year and they achieved past you? Well, again, let's go back to the conversation. One of my previous videos and what I mentioned already. Did they have other experiences that just got them there that you're just not aware of? Probably. And so that's the first thing. Because if you start to think in this realm, you're not going to be successful in the long term. If you start to get emotional on everything, yes, to a degree, you're not going to get where you could be. And so that's where I like to take it and kind of apply the investor's mindset on this. Now you might be thinking, okay, what is this investment mindset that you are thinking about? Well, the investment mindset, it's not like the trader's mindset. Now, traders, they do have to develop a kind of stoicism up to a point, if you really want to get solid on this, where you have to have emotional impulse and emotional control, to be able to not get too emotional on losing a trade. And so when you're an investor, I say investors because it's one of those key scenarios where you are setting yourself up for the long term. And what like my mentor kind of likes to say is you're planting the seeds and you're going for the winter, you're letting it take its time, and then when it comes springtime and they're all grown, you can reap what you sowed. And so that's the whole idea here is you're planting your seeds and you're waiting through these seasons, whether these seasons might be a quarter, whether it might be a couple months or like a semester, if you will, like 6 months, whether it be a full year or even a decade. You got to start thinking about in that terms. And it goes back to the book by Grant Cardone, who talks about the 10x factor. And I think there's another book that says it's easier to do 10x than 2x, which have not read it. I imagine it's probably the same thing. Where Grant Cardone pretty much outlines saying, hey, look, humans are just bad at guessing and estimating time. There's actually a cognitive bias he just mentioned. I don't think he mentions a cognitive bias, but it is a cognitive bias in humans where they are not able to estimate an allotted amount of time that actually will take, because usually there's unforeseen changes or unforeseen amount of work, because we are unable to really estimate accurately how much time it's going to take, because there's so much more that goes into it that we're just completely unaware of. And that's fine. But when you realize that, you got to take it from the framework, and this is what Grant Cardone's big part of his book is if you're having a goal, if you have a set goal, 10x it. 10x your goal, but also at the same rate, 10x that effort. Because when you start to do that, you start to think in new ways of thinking about something, how to get from X to Y to Z, whatever it may be, from one goal to another goal. It'll make you think about, okay, what are all the different intricate pieces that I need to get together to reach this goal and a 10x level. Because, but just say if you aim for the moon and you miss, you land among the stars. Now, I'm not a big fan of that really saying, because I think it's overused really, but that's the kind of the point of what he's trying to make. Even if you don't reach your big kind of lofty goal, it's going to be better than trying to reach for that, because you may get halfway, and that's still better than like your smaller step goal that you would have had, that you maybe would have kind of aimed for and you realized, oh, that's not really what I wanted. I'm not actually as happy with the result I got with that. So when you start to think about this as an investor, sometimes you're going to pick maybe a couple stocks. Maybe you're going to pick a couple cryptos that you know are utility, that's going to be a long-term play. It's not going to be like these meme coins or these other projects that are shooting to the moon within like a couple months or a couple years. This is more of a super long term play, but you know you have time. And so that's the goal of this is yes, you may see these people on YouTube. You might see other businesses bragging about where they are, these certain people bragging about where they are, and cool. Good for them, right? But do not get in your head because a lot of these people are probably going to wither away within time because they'll hit something that would just cause them to kind of just stop. It gets too hard, it gets boring, it just doesn't work out because of XYZ. They're not meant for it, and that's fine. But you can easily pass them over time if you start thinking in this framework. If you're working with employees and you're struggling to kind of get progress with them, are you thinking within a week? Okay, it's been a week. They're still not where we want them. Okay, fine. That's completely fine. If you're in a quarter, okay, how have they progressed in this quarter? Okay, they done this, this, this. They seem to be making progress. Good. Let me give them some information, some feedback that I want them to kind of work with, chew on, and kind of grow with for this next quarter. Now, if they're not on the trajectory, then you give them that feedback as well. But also there's a big part in holding them accountable. Now, it's a separate point, separate video and everything, but the point being made is, are you thinking in a long-term trajectory from a quarter to a semester to a year to even a decade? Or are you thinking so short-term that you feel like you're getting more emotional on it when it's not going to help anyone? Hopefully this is helpful and something that I kind of just been kind of working out myself, and I figured this might be a great video for others. Hopefully you guys find it helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.